Greetings YouTube, Captain Machine here. This is Newsbeat number 2, and although I did promise these would be coming out on Sundays, basically my timekeeping skills are not as effective as I would like them to be, and as such it's coming out on Monday again. It'll be Monday evening as well by the time I get this damn thing out. Now, I've had several different topics I could have talked about, and when I did go and ask some of my friends, what's the news topic this week that everyone's been talking about, they all said Wimbledon. And Wimbledon, of course, if you may or may not be aware, is basically the worldwide tournament champions held in England, which is quite prominent because of its history. There is a US one, I believe, and there's probably a European one as well. I've not really looked into it much further, but if I talked about that, I was just talking about tournaments and tourneys and competitions, and that's been done to death. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, I don't know what this is called in the real world, basically the global economic crisis. What do I mean when I say that? Because there are two at the moment. There are two of them, and a lot of people just assume there's one, but there's two. The first is what is commonly known in the UK as the credit crunch, which is basically a lot of banks have made a lot of poor lending decisions in the past, and people have started foreclosing on themselves, or allowing themselves to be foreclosed on, and banks are losing money because of this. Northern Rock almost went under because of it, and I believe there was a US bank that also had the exact same problem. Although I don't know what the outcome to that was, because the honest truth is it's a American bank, and I don't understand how American banking systems work because it is different to the UK. So that is one aspect, and that's driving things like house prices up or down. Yeah, sure, driving them up. Yeah, so that's one problem in the world right now. Basically, because of that, people have less money to spend. The second problem is oil, because oil has suddenly become a really big supply and demand issue. It's got to the point now where basically oil year on year has been produced at roughly the same rate, and now more people need it, which means demand is now starting to outstrip supply, which means the prices start going up. Because you'll get, say, a man who has 100 barrels of oil, and he usually sells it for $50 a barrel. And he goes, right, I will sell this all for $50 a barrel. And one guy comes up and says, I will buy it for $50 a barrel. And the guy next to him, who needs it just as much, goes, 60. I'll pay 60 a barrel because I need it more than he does. And then the guy next to him goes, no, I do still need it more than you do, I think. So I'm going to pay $70. And eventually they start to haggle between themselves, which drives the price up. It's like an auction, basically, on a global scale. Now, how do you apply this to a role-playing game? Now, I'm going to use a fantasy setting as my basis, because the honest truth is that you can use anything as a fantasy setting. Although, thankfully, this is one of the topics you can actually use in any setting, be it fantasy, modern, or science fiction. Right, I'm going to give you an example, and basically allow me to run with this, and I'm sure that being creative people out there, you can come up with something as well. Now, here we go. In a Tolkien-esque world, the best steel is not made by dwarves, but at least the iron for it is supplied by dwarves. There's this lovely mountain range, and it's full of iron ore, absolutely chocker full of it, and the dwarves have been mining it for hundreds of years, and they've started exporting it because it is the best iron in all of the land. A good example of this in the real world is that during the Middle Ages, Spain was renowned for its iron because it was the best you could get. It had the least amount of impurities and produced the best steel, the strongest steel, in fact. Same could be said for this dwarven iron. Now, let's say, for example, that these dwarves have been at war with these goblins in the same mountain range for quite some time. It's a Tolkien-esque idea, so as such it's not unusual. It's been done to death. It's been done in RuneQuest, and in D&D, and in Warhammer. Now, let's say, for sake of argument, that either the Dwarven Hold is destroyed, or in this scenario we're going to talk about, it is severely hammered to the point where the dwarves, out of interest to keep maintaining their dwarven holes so they don't get overrun by the goblins, have had to collapse several tunnels, which have cut them off from several of the mines, in fact the majority of the mines in the area. Now, until they're able to resolve the problem, which would take quite a grand military campaign. That means that they've run out of ore for the iron, which means they can export less. It also means that their manufacturing industry, because that's what dwarves are famous for doing, is also screwed. Because you can't really have a good, efficient manufacturing economy if you don't have the raw materials on hand. If you have to import them, that drives the prices up, which means your already expensive dwarven items are now even more expensive, so less people are willing to buy them. Now, in the human lands, down below the mountains, in the flat plains and the forests, they haven't been really developing their mining technology, because why should you just buy it off the dwarves? It's easy to do it that way. I mean, after all, they need food, so you sell your food to them and they sell that iron to you, and it works out pretty well. Until the dwarves stop delivering it, because they can't, or they deliver such small quantities it's not enough. At this point now, demand is now starting to outstrip supply, which means that merchants are now arguing amongst themselves on who gets the ore that comes down from the mountains, which means they're willing to pay more for it, because they're desperate to have it, because if you don't have it, you don't have a business at all, and you are going to go under very quickly. Now, that means that they have to absorb the cost of that additional amount, which means they pass that money on to the people they sell it to, say the blacksmiths in the area. And let's say, for example, the blacksmiths, well, they can't afford to absorb that loss either, so they pass the prices on to the customers. So this can all happen really quickly. We're talking ridiculously quick. You can have an adventuring party, first adventuring party. Buy the goods at the PHB for their characters. They go on their first little quest. They go and travel for a week, get to a dungeon, spend 3 or 4 days going through a dungeon, come back a week later. So they've been gone almost 3 weeks now, and the prices have shot up on everything made out of steel. So swords now cost more, armour costs more to repair. Arrowheads, which are normally 10 a penny, are now 5 a penny. You get the idea. So that could seriously impact on player characters straight away, and this over a very short period of time. Now, I wouldn't say work out what the worst possible place it could be at and then just apply it immediately. This would be a gradual thing to the point where it was so desperate it was not even funny anymore. Basically, now let's say, for sake of argument, that this blacksmith in this town makes ploughs and shoes horses and things like that. Now let's say the farmers can't afford to buy new ploughs off him or have their horses shoed, which means their manufacturing processes are severely hampered for this. So in a couple of seasons' time they'll be able to produce less food, which means they'll have less food to sell, which means there might be a food shortage, or at least no excess of food to pass on to other countries or customers, which means he has less money to spend. When he has less money to spend, the farmer can't buy as many things, which means the manufacturing people in town or in the local area get less money because they can't sell what they've made. Which means to make money, means to break even, they have to charge more, and the whole thing starts to spiral, horribly so. And there would only really be 2 ways of fixing that problem. Would be either to become dependent on somewhere else to get your ore from, which would stabilise everything, but that would take some time because in this example the humans haven't developed the ability to get massive quantities out of the ground on a quick basis like the dwarves do. Or, this is a great thing about being a fantasy role player, you could be the guys who go to the mountains and you fix the problem because you go and kill all the goblins. And that's what I like about it, but that's how you could use it in a fantasy setting. You could use it in one set just by taking real world. I mean, if you're playing World of Darkness, for example, you could just have what is happening right now in your World of Darkness game. So that's the easiest of all the 3 of them to do. The last one could be, say, a sci-fi setting. And let's say, for example, there is a nuclear material which is used to make the cold fusion engines that power mechs or spaceships or vehicles or laser guns. Now let's say that this ore is mined exclusively in, say, 2 or 3 different places. What if one of them gets nuked, or one of them has a planet blow up underneath it? I mean, it's a bit overdramatic, but it's possible in the sci-fi game. Just look at Babylon 5, look at Star Wars, look at Star Trek. Good examples of that. Even Stargate has this.